Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, which means let's work together, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Kelli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, and today we are going to talk about the fact that the season is upon us. Now, what season is that? There's a lot going on here in Hawaii right now, and you may be watching from somewhere across the world. We hope so, because you're part of the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network, which puts on some of the best programming there is to inform people about what Hawaii is all about and what our connection to the rest of the world is. My guest today is someone who knows that very well. The producer and founder of ThinkTech Hawaii, and he knows what season is upon us. Please welcome to our program today, Jay Fidell, my good friend.
Hi, so nice to be here with you always.
Jay, it's always wonderful to be with you. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. Now tell me, what season is upon us? Hanukkah?
No, many seasons actually. Maybe we should say the seasons are upon us.
The seasons, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have all these crossroads going on in our state, in our city, and we should talk about where the tipping points are.
There we are.
Where we're all likely to go. It's like standing on a ski hill and having various ski runs all around you, and they're all orange, by the way, meaning tough. And, you know, which one do you go on and how fast do you go?
So all roads lead down.
All roads. I didn't say it, but I agree with it.
I thought there were many pathways up the mountain if you wanted to be religious today. But you know, we have social issues taking place. We have cultural season upon us. We have a political season upon us, and we have most definitely an economic season
and a tech
upon
season,
us.
an energy season. All
There
these
we
things.
go.
We seem
There
to
we
be at
go.
multiple tipping points.
And what is top of mind today?
Top of mind today is Kaka'ako, because we have a program tomorrow about Kaka'ako called Gubernatorial Forum on Kaka'ako, on the development in Kaka'ako.
That's right. And you know, for our friends who are across the world, Kaka'ako is a little district at the front of Honolulu. If you take a look at the beautiful, beautiful city that we have and Honolulu Harbor and the Aloha Tower, if you just keep going a little bit toward more toward Waikiki, you've got a place that used to be a warehouse district and is now being transformed. What is your definition of Kaka'ako?
Oh, it's just geographical. I would include Makai and Mauka both.
Makai meaning toward the sea, and
Yes.
Mauka meaning toward the mountains.
Yes, and in my own mind, I think of the boundaries as South Street to Kapiolani
All right.
Boulevard to Ward Avenue, I guess. Although, I mean, there are some who would argue that the Diamond Head boundary is further Diamond Head, but I see it as Ward Avenue.
And this little historic district is undergoing phenomenal transformation from a sleepy little warehousing area. It is now the site of Hawaii's most intense development. We've got several big players. We've got the Hughes down there developing. We've got Kamehameha Schools.
Yeah.
We've got the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Yes.
And at least 30, how many now? 37 buildings have been approved to come up in this area?
Something like that. Yeah.
That's a lot. When was the last time you saw this kind of transformation
Never.
in part of Hawaii?
Hawaii has never had anything close to this at any point. You know, you look back at some of those photographs of construction around the time of statehood. 59, 60s,
Right, like the
61.
Ala Moana Shopping Center and all of the cranes that were going up and so forth.
Yeah, and the
remember
various
that.
other projects and highways and, you know, sort of changing the landscape, building a new Hawaii. That was Sleepy Town compared to what's going on now.
So this is the most intensive, compact development we've experienced. Some people say it will make part of Honolulu look like Hong Kong or Singapore. What do you think?
Well, if you're talking about the high-rises, there'll be a lot of high-rises, and there are high-rises in Hong Kong and Singapore. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, in some ways, I guess you could say it will make it, Kaka'ako, look like a place of high-rises. Yeah.
Well, you know, depending upon who you talk to, we will learn that what's happening in Kaka'ako is one of the best things that could happen for the state of Hawaii and for this island. But if you talk with other people, you'll hear that it could be one of the worst things that's taking place. What do you think?
I think it should be discussed in detail by, you know, all the stakeholders, all the people who are interested.
So
that's why we set up this program tomorrow night,
Right.
July 1st, at the Capitol Auditorium to invite the gubernatorial and ultimately the lieutenant gubernatorial candidates to express their views on it, because, you know, in Hawaii, right, the elected officials have a lot to do with what happens or doesn't happen.
That's right. And
on a project like this.
we're going to be down at the State Capitol Auditorium on Tuesday, July 1st, from what time, Jay?
5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
5 to 6:30 p.m. And so we'll have some of the gubernatorial candidates, not only one party, but a couple of parties, and also some lieutenant governor candidates.
Yeah.
What are the kinds of issues that will be talked about?
Well, we've asked them to express their views about Kaka'ako, and that's not limiting it very much. We want to talk about the development in Kaka'ako.
Sure.
We want to talk about how you do it right.
Hey, Jay, have you seen some of the surveys for political candidates that have been going around from Star Advertiser, Civil Beat, some of the political action committees?
Tell me.
Almost every one of them has a question about what do you think about Kaka'ako development? And then there's a second question on many of them. What do you think about Kaka'ako development of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, by the Office of Hawaiian
That's
Affairs?
an interesting dichotomy, but I think that it's a valid one. I'm sure you agree that what's happening on the Mauka side is, it's sort of been long in coming. People have been talking about it. They've been conceiving of the Mauka side as a residential community, in large part, not totally, but in large part, for as long as HCDA has been in existence.
The Hawaii
That's the
Community
migration.
Development Agency,
Yeah. But in the Makai side,
the ocean side.
we tried that in 2005. There was a project that A and B
Alexander and Baldwin.
negotiated with DBED, the Department of Business, Economic Development, Tourism, which went down in flames.
Right. I think public sentiment at that time, political sentiment was, let's keep the taller residential towers on the mountainside, the Mauka side, but when it comes to the ocean side, let's have less development. Let's not block the skyline. And we heard a lot of voices. We heard from surfers. We heard from environmentalists and so forth. And that's kind of set the stage now for a lot of the development going forward today.
Well, yeah, and what was really interesting, people forget that Ed Cadman was the dean of the medical school, which was
John
built
Burns
in
Medical School.
John A. Burns Medical School, which was built in 2002 or something like that. And he had a vision. He wrote about it and talked about it a lot. That big pharma would come and there would be a campus of technology, science right around the medical school. And then Carl Vogel was the director of the Cancer Research Institute, and his vision was that there would be a huge cancer research institute on what is now known as Parking Lot C or 3, which is just EVA of the research building at the School of Medicine. And it was going to be a home for technology.
Right.
Makai was going to be, and you could question whether the medical school should be in such a place or that a home for technology should be in such a place. But many, many people conceived of it as a home for technology. And sadly, this A&B project sort of derailed all of that. There was a great big, controversy over it. And when the dust cleared, nothing. The Lingle administration didn't do anything more about it. Just dropped it as if we don't want to do anything here.
Now, yes.
And then, nobody talked about tech again. And so the result now is that there's really only a slimmer of a chance that there'll be tech in Makai.
Well, what does all of this tell us about the way we do things in Hawaii? This is an interesting question because many people come here and may have been here for a year or 2 years or 5 years doing business, and they discover that some things are done here in a rather unique way. Here we had a vision for tremendous development of a world-class technological center, one that would push the university's reputation up quite a bit, one that would attract some of the leading medical scholars and pharmaceutical companies, but it didn't happen. Then we also had a vision for some wonderful development of residential properties and so forth, Alexander and Baldwin's point of view, but of course that clashed with some of the environmental considerations. What have we learned about the way decisions get made here in Hawaii and the factors that help us to move forward or keep us from moving forward? What have you observed?
Some loose thoughts, but I think it's a very good question we should all ask ourselves, and every candidate should ask himself or herself. Thing is that in order to do big projects, ambitious projects, visionary projects, you've got to have a leader. Because if you don't have a leader, then everybody tends to bicker with each other, and it just goes off the side for lack of forward motion.
That's an interesting comment, because the projects were big and visionary, but you're saying we lacked having a single leader to really drive that through, somebody to galvanize the public.
Yeah, it's remember Emile Zola?
Yeah.
His whole thing was the human experiment, and he would take a human person or a group of people, and he would change the facts on them. We do this in art all the time, in movies and theater, and see what happened. And so I give you, those 3 buildings that Alexander Baldwin was going to build. This is not unlike Super Ferry, not unlike rail. And I give you a leader who would support those buildings, support those projects, engage with the public, find a middle ground, but keep the flag flying, keep moving ahead. I think, not saying better or worse, but I think that project would have been able to go forward if somebody had stood there and acted, as the leader in the engagement. If John Burns, for example, who was a great leader in Hawaii, I mean, he was the perfect leader because he knew how to do it with the Hawaii melting pot. He knew how to do it. But if we had had a leader in that project, it would have gone forward, I think.
Well,
if we had had a leader, see, unfortunately, Ed Cadman became ill, and he could not push it. And Cayetano was a leader of sorts. He created the medical school such as it is, but then he was out of office, and Lingle really didn't care to continue his project. So the result was that for the lack of a leader, the whole big pharma campus, went off the side. The Cancer Research Center likewise went off the side. So in Hawaii, maybe it's so elsewhere, but in Hawaii, you need a leader who will stick with it. Now, what does that mean? It means that being a leader in a sea of controversy or potential controversy means taking the slings and arrows.
Yes.
It means, being resistant to people who complain about you. It's knowing you're right, talking to people and getting the, I want to say consensus, but the truth of the community will and going forward with that. And a lot of, quote, leaders that we've seen don't do that. And so the result is they don't have the credibility and they don't have the will, they don't follow through on the rhetoric they might have expressed earlier to get the project done. And so we are so often behind the curve on finishing our own vision. And that's still the case today with so many things. In the case of Kaka'ako, it's kind of interesting because Kaka'ako has a sort of a life of its own. It's hard to say there's a visible leader there who's engaging with people. This may or may not work. It's not clear. We're going to find out more tomorrow night.
Absolutely. And in fact, some of the people coming tomorrow night, July 1st at the state capitol, 5 p.m. for the gubernatorial forum on Kaka'ako, are going to be vying for that position of becoming the leader. And we naturally look to the governor. Does the governor have the capacity to galvanize the people around a direction and lead and go forth? I think you are right, Jay. We have experienced a crisis of leadership in the Kaka'ako project, but beyond that, that crisis of leadership touches many things in the islands. And as we go forward also, we see that Kaka'ako uniquely brings together stakeholders of almost every value system, all stakeholders here in Hawaii. We've got big business, small business. We've got the wealthy, we've got the poor. We've got the diverse community, then we've got specific ethnic groups like the Native Hawaiians with the role of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. It's fascinating to see all of the voices that are emerging, development, environmentalism, and so forth. All of those voices are emerging in the discussion about what Kaka'ako should be and in the politics of what Kaka'ako should be.
It's the way it works. It's de Tocqueville's tumultuous democracy.
There we go.
But you know what? You're a philosophy guy. You know that.
Alex de Tocqueville?
Of course. But
he was French.
Thank you. How do I know that? But it seems to me that when you're finished with all the de Tocqueville fragmentation, if you will, then you really have to have somebody to pull it together and go one direction or the other. Otherwise, you're in a state of perpetual tumultuousness, which is really not the way to go. I mean, that's the way to fail. Tumultuousness ultimately can fail you. And so we've got to find a better way to make our decisions, hold to our decisions, follow through in our decisions. And
Sure.
unfortunately, I think if you look back over the last 20 years, you find that we haven't done that.
Would you say that one of the dimensions of the problem at Kaka'ako is that we're now coming face to face with some extremes? We have the extreme of the haves and the have-nots, those who could afford multi-million-dollar condos, those who can't afford affordable housing. We've got the very wealthy, we've got the impoverished. We even have a gubernatorial candidate who is camping out in Kaka'ako with the homeless in order to demonstrate, his philosophy and so forth.
Celebrity sleep-in.
There we go.
calls it, yeah.
And we've got the concern for the environment and the shoreline and not blocking the view versus the need for urban housing and so forth. Have you seen so many conflicts?
Never before. No, that's true. This is a magnet for every kind of controversial position you could imagine. I mean, I've never seen them all come together in so many ways.
So we need a leader who's capable. We need Solomon, who can come in and use his great wisdom and tell which mother owns the baby. So
we need a fair-minded fellow or girl who will put this all together and stick with the decision and not go into what I call statewide amnesia, which is so easy. We've done that.
A state of amnesia?
State of amnesia, not the state of energy.
That sounds like another program for us. Speaking of which, we'll come back and maybe we will have the state of amnesia, if I remember who my guest is, but I can't forget him. He's Jay Fidell, the producer and founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. We're kind of digging into his brain and in his heart, and I said, what did you want to talk about today? And he said, Kaka'ako. And if you know Jay, he always wants to talk about Kaka'ako, but it is an important issue, and it helps us to understand many of the things that are uniquely Hawaii today. I'm Kelli'i Akina. We'll be right back on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network right after this message.
I'm Jay Fidell. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the state of clean energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the state of clean energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there.
Well, aloha and welcome back to E Hana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Again, I'm Kelli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and today my guest is my friend Jay Fidell, founder and president of ThinkTech Hawaii. Now, Jay, as we finish up talking about Kaka'ako,
just one more point.
You had one more point, absolutely.
Yeah. I got an email this morning from Paul Brubaker. He's an economist.
All right,
yeah.
there he is.
You've had him, haven't you? Yeah.
I know Paul. I had lunch with him the other day.
Okay. And he said, you really have to, ask them at this Kaka'ako gubernatorial forum tomorrow, don't we need housing? And you made the point earlier. And I said, Paul, come down and tell us about how badly we need housing, And
Did you discount his ticket at least? It's free, folks, by the way. Go ahead.
In fact, a year ago, we had a program called Housing in Hawaii, and we'll have another one. And Paul was the keynote speaker for that, and he made that point. We need housing. No matter what you want to say about all the details and the controversies over it and the environmental considerations and social, economic, all that, we still need housing. No matter what you say, unless we get housing, we're going to be in trouble. The millennials will be in trouble, and thus we will all be in trouble. So I said, Paul, come down and talk about it. You know how to do that. And he said he was on a neighbor island and he couldn't. Okay, so I'll mention this. But I want to tell you, I agree with him. And I think we must all agree with him. There's not enough housing in the state. The question is, what kind of housing do we need? And for whom? And how you make that happen. And the great conundrum of Kaka'ako is here's land that somehow got to be worth much more than we thought it was. And because it's worth so much money, the highest and best use is a multi-million-dollar condo, and that's what the owners of this land, think they need to do with it. The problem is that doesn't. If Paul thinks that answers the question of housing, it doesn't, because that's not housing for the people of Hawaii. So we got to do something about housing. Can we do it in Kaka'ako? How can we do it in Kaka'ako? These are very complex problems.
They're complex, and there used to be a time when they were simple, when Paul went to school and learned his economics, and Paul Brubaker learned from Paul Samuelson probably, and when I went to school,
So did I.
You went to school, that was my first text, and before I discovered Milton Friedman. And back in those days, there was a relationship between supply and demand. And when supply was low and demand was high, the price shoots through the roof. So remember those really basic principles before we learned about tax subsidies and the government and all of that.
It's all
and so
changed
forth.
now, isn't it?
Yeah, because we moved very far away from that. But in many ways, Kaka'ako has to deal for us, for the whole state, with the question of supply and demand. Do we have an ample supply of land on which we can build so that we can meet the demand for housing? But when we go up, who affords that kind of housing? That's an important question.
Well, funny you should mention that.
Yes.
I wrote a column on this very point.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Jay, I was looking for someone who wrote a column on this. Would you tell us what your main thesis was?
Do you know who
in
the
this column?
largest landowner is in the state?
Well, the largest landholder is the government.
Right. The government has enormous amounts of land, okay? But the government is shy about using the land. I mean, it's kind of I think it goes way back to the sovereignty issue. There are people who don't want the government to use the land at all because someday maybe the land will be returned. Maybe someday we'll go back to, pre-territorial days.
So let me just interject. I think we're about 3.5 million acres here in the entire state, and 1.8 million of that, about 2 million, about half of that is what we call the ceded lands that once belonged to the Hawaiian Kingdom that were given to the federal government, and the federal government gave it to the state. And you're suggesting that one of the reasons that we have a scarcity of land is that some people want to keep all of those ceded lands together so that they may one day inherit those lands or grab them or get them through eminent domain or by being declared a native tribe.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but my point in the column was we have tons of land that could be used for housing, and yet we don't use it for housing. This is really too
Well, let me
bad.
ask you this question. About what percentage of our land is zoned for residential housing? Is it like 20%, 10%? You know what I've heard from people like Paul Brubaker? We're talking about less than 2%. And if we were to double, I'm not proposing that, but if we were to double the land upon which we are zoned for residential housing, for building, it would only take up 4% of all the land of the islands. Isn't that interesting? So do you think there's an artificial scarcity being imposed by the government?
I do. Well, I mean, I don't think the government has somebody in the back room saying, well, let's make an artificial scarcity. I think the reality is that the government feels obligated to leave government land undeveloped.
Well, let me...
and so no development on the most plentiful of all the landowners in the state. And it's really hard to believe that the government would talk about housing problems when the government has the power to solve all this.
So we go back to the old basic economics. When supply is down and demand is up, the price shoots through the roof. So what you need to do is increase that supply, even if it's just a
That's
little
what
bit.
I said in the article.
You know, you and I think alike.
I think so.
And what happens when you increase the supply? You satisfy the demand and the price comes down. Now, my question to you is this. Does everybody want the price of housing to come down?
No. I mean, the real estate industry is happy enough to see it go sky high. Everybody in the chain, of title, the chain of activity around land would like to see high prices.
I'm glad you broadened that. It's not just the realtors. It's not just the realty industry,
But
it's
we have an
developers,
industry
it's
that-
contractors,
Yeah,
it's unions, everybody
if the
somehow
price of
invested
land,
in
the
this.
value of land is greater, everybody who touches it does better. And so all those people, their interest, their Kuleana interest, which is not the common good, would like to see the values get high, stay high, go higher.
And there you go. And so there's a vested interest that some people have in keeping the supply of available land for housing low so that the price is high.
I don't know if they think of it in those terms, but certainly that's the net effect.
Well, people may not think in terms of the logic and the analysis, but people act in terms of their own self-interest. And that action on a grand level results in what we see as the status quo in Hawaii.
And that takes us straight back to leadership.
There you go.
Somebody who can bear the slings and arrows, who can take the risk, who can face the crowd, who's not worried about raising money for the next election and all that, and do it because it's right, because it serves the common good. That's leadership,
And that's
in my view.
right. In fact, one of the most important aspects of an effective leader, according to Kouzes and Posner, who have had the largest surveys of effective leaders anywhere, these two professors out of Santa Clara, this is the value. Challenges the process. Somebody who can challenge the process. Unfortunately, a lot of leaders actually benefit from the present system. They benefit from the process that's in place, so they don't challenge it. They benefit from it. So, Jay, somebody is going to have to rise up, maybe at your gubernatorial forum tomorrow night, July 1st at the state capitol, 5 p.m. Somebody's going to have to rise up and say, this is how I challenge the process. This is how I will help to increase the supply of available land. What do you think?
that would change the essential formula around kaka'ako. I mean, a lot of people, don't think of it in these terms, but if this land is valuable, and it has gotten to be valuable probably because some of the things are around the HCDA prospects for development, it's gotten to be valuable. There was something on television last week to the effect that these condos and this, the whole market in kaka'ako had gone up an extraordinary number in the past year or less. 60% up was the article. Woo, that's a lot. And it's the reality. That's what it is. People are willing to pay more. People are willing to come in and buy multi-million-dollar condos. What are you going to do about that? You can't say, no, we're going to do rent control. Rent control is not going to work in Hawaii. That's my view. So what do you do for housing, for Paul Brubaker's housing? Building $2 or $3 million condos is not going to help house the people. So what do you do? Well, maybe you look elsewhere. Maybe kaka'ako is a place where the people, they don't necessarily live, but they work, they study, they play, they come for a glass of wine on a promenade with a tree-lined street in a nice outdoor cafe, and it's not too expensive, and that's the way they spend their recreational time. This will draw a lot of people. They may not be able to afford it, but at least they can enjoy it. And the housing that they live in is somewhere else. It's on maybe state land.
Perhaps.
Land that is not going to be quite as expensive.
And we're going to need that leader who's able to bring some rationality to the discussion of whether or not we're harming the environment or whether we are violating some of the sacredness that Hawaiians have felt about the Aina or the land or whatever issue is there. Leaders are going to have to take into consideration the different stakeholders and yet move us forward. Well, moving us forward now for a moment here, there are other issues that are near and dear to your heart. Want to pick up on one of them in the remaining time?
How much time we have?
Oh, we've got another 20 minutes to keep talking. And I think that one of the issues that interestingly came up recently was the stadium. We've had this stadium for quite a while. And I can't remember a time when people were thrilled about the construction of the stadium, the maintenance of the stadium, and so forth. We seem to have perennially had problems, and now there's a proposal that maybe what we should do is knock it down and downscale and get a smaller stadium that is high-tech. What are your thoughts about the stadium? And even possibly relocate it out to West Oahu College, where there's more land available and we could really build what we want to build.
I'm all into redevelopment. and I think the stadium was a mistake in the first place. There were mistakes in the construction. It was the Emperor's New Clothes with the self-rusting steel. Boy, that was a.
Did you believe that, by the way?
No, I
That-
did not. From day one, I never believed
We
it.
were actually told that it was
Brooklyn
planned
Bridge.
to turn rust because that was protecting it from the elements.
And people really like their ball games. You got to give them credit, and they want to come out and do recreation at a stadium and have a hot dog, whatever the experience is. I'm not like that. As far as I'm concerned, you could pull the whole stadium down, make housing out of it. Make what people really need, and put it somewhere else far away later, because we can't afford it now. We should open that land up, just as I was suggesting, for state land, and make reasonable housing for reasonable people at reasonable incomes.
Now, is a stadium an issue that can be decided by itself? I see a lot of times there are issues that we look at in isolation. Or isn't whether we have a stadium or what kind of stadium we have interrelated to a whole bunch of other factors, like can we market Hawaii to keep a Super Bowl? Can we get a world-class football or basketball team or whatever it may be? All kinds of factors such as this, don't they work themselves into the decision as to whether we should go forward with the stadium? We have another big structure, the convention center. And wouldn't having a convention center be related to issues like what can we do to attract conventions to Hawaii and so forth? What do you think about the need for this kind of interconnectivity and these different systems that have to work in order for these goodies really to make sense?
You mean planning? I think you mean
There you
planning.
go.
That's what you mean. to call a spade
I
a
was
spade,
trying.
it's
I was
about
trying
planning.
to make it sound exotic.
Planning can be exotic. Well, I think Hawaii has been really bad planning, and we don't interconnect those things, and we really should. And we have a hodgepodge, architecturally, in terms of use around the city, in terms of the places we go, the things we do. It's all hodgepodge. And I mean, at first it was cute. It was cute in the 50s and the 60s to have all these hodgepodge things. It's not cute anymore. The city is really a wreck. The architecture is bad. You got all these areas that need to be redeveloped and not being nobody wants to put any money in, neither individuals nor the state, in Waikiki we have the exception because that's, big profit. But in terms of building a community that everybody will like, we're not there. Somebody has to make a plan and put all this together, connect all the dots.
Well, how do we do this? Take the neighborhood we're in right now. You and I are right now sitting in downtown Honolulu at the Pioneer Plaza, and if we just walk south a little bit toward Aloha Tower, we're going to see a big building, an electric plant. An electric plant that has really, it's a really vintage. That's the kindest thing I can say about it. It's from a time in the past. But that just sits there, and there are no less than 12 different city, state, county, federal agencies that would all have to line up along with all the businesses in order to do something about that and to remove it. How do we exercise the leadership to solve those kinds of problems here in Hawaii? Because that's precisely the case with the stadium or with the convention center and so forth. So many overlapping jurisdictions. So many people have different kuleana. How could a leader lead in such a way to build consensus for real change?
Well, okay, I mean, you're really asking two questions. First, you got to get the leader who's willing to do this, and we haven't had that. But then, once you get the leader who's willing, he says, Kelli'i, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's no issue here. That power plant doesn't belong at the foot of Bishop Street. This is our precious waterfront. This is recreational. This is for the people. This is to make the city a friendlier place to be. We've been waiting much too long on this. We have to make a waterfront, like all the other cities, in the mainland that have real waterfronts. We don't have here we are, an ocean state along the water. We don't have a waterfront. Isn't that incredible? Okay, he's got to say that. And then you got to say, Hawaiian Electric Company, what'll it take for you to take that down? Because if you and I agree that it should come down, we'll make a deal. We'll buy it from you. We'll make a deal with someone else. We'll have all the agreement we need among all the people we need to have agreement with, and we'll have it come down, and we'll replace it with, who knows what, something that fits the waterfront. We'll make a plan, and we'll build a better city. To leave it there every day, every week, every month, and on and on and on without any real horizon for making it into a friendly piece of real estate is really too bad.
You know, as you talk about this, what comes to my mind is that there would be many leaders who'd be reluctant to act courageously because of the interests that reach out to them. You mentioned one, a corporation, Hawaiian Electric for one.
Well, it owns it.
Yes.
And you're going to have to talk with them.
but there are many interests that vie for the attention of power holders, people who are decision makers, and we really need somebody who is going to stand up and say, I don't care about that. You know, maybe you, Jay, I've retired. My law firm, my practice, that was in the past. I just tinker around with the television studio now and then. I've got nothing to lose. I'll lead the charge. So let me know when you're ready to sign up, and I'll wave signs for you.
Well, it's hard to say where this leader is going to come from. I like to think that he's not here just yet, but maybe he is. We have some very good candidates running. And he will surface soon because he will agree with us. And he will change the state by changing the whole approach to leadership, to dealing with the legislature, to dealing with the people, to engaging, as I mentioned before, and to take a sort of an organic and a larger landscape view of it.
You're listening to Jay Fidell talk about the leader to come. A little bit messianic, perhaps, but someone very much in need here in Hawaii. And maybe this election will see such a person emerge and come to the forefront. We encourage you to come on out on July 1st at 5 o'clock p.m. to the State Capitol Auditorium, which is in the basement of the State Capitol, for the ThinkTech Hawaii Gubernatorial Forum with gubernatorial and lieutenant gubernatorial candidates. We'll come right back to E Hana Kako right after this message. I'm Kelli'i Akina. Don't go away. We'll close up in just a few minutes.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Welcome back to E Hana Kako. We're here every week on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network, dealing with issues that are important to Hawaii and the world, and showing us why Hawaii and the world are very much together. My guest today, Jay Fidell, is one of my best friends because he loves Hawaii. He really does. And he sees in his vision a place where we can come together with creativity, with talent, with acceptance of all people, and build not only a better Hawaii, but a better world. Now, back to you, Jay. Jay,
It's about avoiding kuleana.
Avoiding
I know
our
that de Tocqueville
responsibility.
would support the idea of kuleana in his tumultuous view of democracy, but we've got to go further than that. We've got to do for the common good. Everybody should be doing for the common good. Too few people are doing for the common good. And one would expect, onto your next topic, OHA, one would expect OHA to do for the common good. It is not doing that. Sorry.
OHA has for 35 years been pursuing a plan, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, to define Native Hawaiians as a Native Indian tribe, get federal recognition so that they would have autonomy or sovereignty over land, be able to increase land acquisition, be able to do on land whatever they want, and according to the last Akaka bill, even operate casinos on that land. Jay, what are your thoughts about this pathway? In fact, it's very timely now because we have the Department of the Interior here playing a federal part, entertaining the idea of possibly providing tribal status to OHA's efforts to build a Native Hawaiian sovereign nation.
You know, it's been said the federal government is bloated, and clearly the Department of the Interior has too much time on its hands. Sounds like the Veterans Administration. If they're getting bonuses for what they're doing, they should be out of a job. This is ridiculous what they're doing. We settled this matter 120 years ago. What in the world is going on? The federal government, they should be supporting the federal United States of America, not allowing for the creation of a separate tribe that has not really existed as a tribe ever.
Jay, you said we settled this issue 120 years ago, and by which I think you are referring to the fact that Hawaii is part of the United States of America.
Got it.
So what do you think
Thank you for
about
that.
what do you think about the CEO of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs raising the question, asking the Secretary of State whether that is so?
I disagree with him. I think most people in the state disagree with him. I don't know why he should be paid with, essentially, with taxpayer dollars to take such a position. And I mentioned before about Kuleana, you know, that whole thing about establishing a separate tribe, a separate nation, that's the ultimate in Kuleana, isn't it? What about the common good? You know, I would like to see OHA do the common good. I think it was organized to do the common good, but it is not doing that.
Well, you know that right here in your seat, one of the sitting trustees went on the record for the first time publicly to say that the pursuit of the Akaka bill, which could have amounted to well over $20 million, and the pursuit of the Native Hawaiian role to start this Hawaiian nation, several million dollars, have been a waste of money, that the money could have been and should have been used to educate, to build housing, to have medical care and so forth. Your thoughts on that?
Yes.
Absolutely. So how do we go forward? This is the magic of ThinkTech Hawaii. We're not here merely to state the problem, but we want to dream about and we want to affect the solution. So here we have this growing movement of nationalizing or creating a separate sovereign nation. We have a runaway state office, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, using our resources to promote that. We've got a public that is confused about the entire issue. We have a federal government with an
federal government that's confused.
There you go. An executive branch that is flirting with this and so forth. How do we move forward for a more harmonious, productive society? That's the leadership question.
Well, there's long-term and short-term, but the short-term is we elect people to the board of OHA, the board of trustees of OHA, who have a more sensible approach and who will do the common good. And if a trustee trustee candidate gets up and he says, I am going to do the common good, then vote for him. And I suppose also I would add, vote, because it's been, you know, established by the Supreme Court of the United States that everybody can vote for OHA trustees, am I right?
Absolutely.
And so why don't we vote to clear this up? If we don't vote and we let a small subset of people who essentially are on a destructive path vote, then we'll get exactly what we didn't vote for. But I really think that OHA has got to be embraced by the entire community, not just a few people.
Well, sometimes people feel sentimental, and they say, sentimentally, we don't want to interfere with the Hawaiians and their self-determinism. We don't want to vote in the OHA election out of respect. But I think that they need to understand that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is dealing with the assets and resources of the citizens of Hawaii. These are lands belonging to all citizens, and if we don't pay attention,
funded by taxes
there
from
you
the
go,
citizens.
as well. And if we don't pay attention to OHA, which is everyone's business, it could become everyone's problem. Jay, we've got a minute left. Last word of wisdom, not in your life, but at least on this program, for our wonderful audience all across the world.
Well, you're doing a great job. All our hosts, we have 20 of them or so,
Yes.
doing a great job, raising these issues, having these candid conversations. I think ThinkTech's on the right path and providing a great public service. And yes, we are in it for the common good.
And we are on the rise, just like Kaka'ako. Thank you, Jay,
Thank you,
for being
Kelli'i.
with us today. My guest, Jay Fidell, producer, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. You can go to our website, www.thinktechhawaii.com, and see hours and hours of programs. We produce about 20 to 25 hours every week. I'm Kelli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. Looking forward to seeing you next week on a program that means let's work together. E hana kako. Aloha.